If you want to live a life of excellence, you must learn a powerful truth. Your brain is not wired for greatness, it is wired for safety. And if you follow its natural programming, you will coast through life doing the bare minimum, avoiding discomfort and never stepping into your true potential. But here's the great news. You can rewire it. You can train your brain to embrace hard things. And the moment you decide to do what is difficult, what is uncomfortable, and what is unfamiliar, you set yourself apart from 95% of the population. So, let me give you a simple formula that has changed lives. Do the hard things first. The things you dread, the tasks you keep putting off, the goals that make you sweat. They are the keys to everything you want. Success is not a mystery. It is not magic. It is simply a matter of self-discipline applied consistently over time. And every time you force your brain to do what it doesn't want to do, you become stronger, smarter, more unstoppable. Comfort zone addiction is one of the most powerful silent forces holding people back from growth, success, and true fulfillment. The comfort zone is a psychological state where things feel familiar, predictable, and low risk. It's the environment your brain loves most because it demands the least energy and carries the least threat. When you live inside this zone, you rarely experience anxiety, fear, or challenge, but you also rarely grow, and that's the trap. The brain is designed to keep you safe, not successful. It associates routine with survival, and anything unfamiliar or difficult as danger. So when you attempt to step outside this comfort zone, whether it's speaking in public, pursuing a new career, starting a business, or even waking up earlier, your brain fires off warning signals trying to pull you back into safety. This is not a sign that you're incapable. It's a sign that you're human and that your mind is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you from perceived threats. But what it defines as threat is often just growth in disguise. Over time, this addiction to comfort becomes a mental prison. The more you obey the voice that tells you to stay where it's warm and easy, the stronger that voice becomes. And soon, you're not just avoiding discomfort, you're avoiding life. You might find yourself constantly watching others succeed while you stay stuck in the same routines, feeling quietly frustrated, but telling yourself it's not the right time, or maybe later. But deep down, you know, the only way to become more is to do more. And more often than not, that means pushing through the very resistance your brain is trying to protect you from. Every major breakthrough, whether in health, wealth, relationships, or career, comes from doing something uncomfortable. If you want to achieve extraordinary results, you must become addicted not to comfort, but to challenge. You must teach your brain that growth feels better than safety. Because the truth is, the comfort zone may feel good temporarily, but in the long run, it leads to mediocrity, stagnation, and regret. The procrastination mechanism is not just a bad habit, it's a deeply wired psychological defense system. Your brain uses it as a short-term escape from discomfort, stress, or uncertainty. When you're faced with a challenging or important task, especially one that demands focus, energy, or emotional risk, your brain immediately begins to search for relief. That relief often comes in the form of distractions, delay, or shifting attention to something easier or more enjoyable. This isn't laziness, it's a coping strategy. Your mind is trying to preserve energy and avoid what it perceives as emotional danger, whether that's fear of failure, fear of judgment, or even fear of success. So instead of doing the work, you scroll through your phone, reorganize your desk, or convince yourself you'll start tomorrow. In the moment, it feels like a reasonable decision, but over time it becomes a cycle, a loop, where the more you delay, the heavier the task feels. And the heavier it feels, the more resistance your brain builds. This mental loop is the true mechanism of procrastination. Not avoidance for fun, but avoidance for safety. And the cost of this cycle is enormous. Procrastination silently steals your time, energy, opportunities, and self-respect. It creates stress and guilt because while you're not doing the thing you need to do, a part of you is always aware of it. That lingering mental weight drains your focus and lowers your confidence. And here's the most dangerous part. The longer you procrastinate, the more your brain gets used to the habit of delay. You start identifying as someone who puts things off rather than someone who takes action. But the truth is, procrastination is not a personality trait, it's a behavior pattern. And all behavior patterns can be changed. The key is to recognize that the discomfort you're avoiding is temporary, but the results of disciplined action are long-lasting. You must interrupt the pattern by taking immediate small steps, even if they're imperfect. Action, no matter how small, breaks the spell of procrastination. When you act despite resistance, you train your brain to follow through. You build momentum, and momentum is what turns ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. The more you act, the less power procrastination holds over you. Mental fatigue excuse is one of the most deceptive and convincing lies the brain tells you. When faced with a difficult or unfamiliar task, your brain often signals that you're too tired to tackle it. You might say to yourself, "I'll do it tomorrow when I have more energy," or "I just don't have the mental bandwidth right now." But let's be honest, in most cases, this isn't true fatigue, it's resistance in disguise. Real mental exhaustion comes from consistent, focused, cognitive effort over time. What most people experience is decision fatigue, lack of clarity, or simply lack of desire. When the brain anticipates discomfort, it generates a feeling of heaviness or lethargy to nudge you away from the task. It's your built-in energy preservation system at work, not because you're incapable, but because your brain wants to avoid friction. This moment is critical because how you interpret that fatigue determines whether you stay stuck or push forward. What makes this excuse so dangerous is that it feels legitimate. You truly feel tired, but feelings are not facts. That sensation of burnout you're experiencing may not be the result of overwork. It's often the result of under-engagement with meaningful work. When you delay important goals, avoid making decisions, or spend hours scrolling through meaningless content, your brain becomes dull and unmotivated. It's like a muscle that hasn't been used. It loses strength, not because it's overworked, but because it's under-challenged. Ironically, one of the best remedies for this kind of mental fatigue is not more rest, it's focused effort. Once you start engaging in purposeful work, your energy returns, your mind wakes up, your thoughts sharpen. Your brain was designed to solve problems, to take on challenges, to grow stronger through use. But when you deprive it of that challenge, you feel drained, not from doing too much, but from doing too little that truly matters. To overcome the mental fatigue excuse, you must learn to separate emotional resistance from actual physical exhaustion. Ask yourself, am I really too tired, or am I just uncomfortable with what I need to do? That question alone can shift your mindset. Develop the habit of starting even when you don't feel like it. Action is the antidote. The very moment you begin writing the first sentence, making the first call, taking the first step, you generate momentum, and that momentum feeds your energy. This is how high performers operate. They act their way into energy, not wait for energy to arrive. They know that discipline is not about feeling ready. It's about choosing progress over comfort. And the more often you override that false signal of fatigue, the more mental strength you build. Eventually, you stop falling for the excuse, you stop negotiating with your brain, and you become the kind of person who gets things done, regardless of how you feel. Reward system sabotage is one of the most powerful and misunderstood obstacles to productivity, discipline, and long-term achievement. Your brain is hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's a survival mechanism that once helped early humans stay alive, but in the modern world, this wiring has been hijacked. The same system that once drove us to hunt, build, and grow now constantly seeks instant gratification in the form of dopamine hits from social media, junk food, entertainment, and distractions. Instead of being a tool to motivate progress, your brain's reward system becomes a trap. It rewards you not for doing what matters, but for doing what's easy. And every time you choose that low-effort, high-reward activity, like checking your phone instead of working on your goals, you reinforce the neural pathways that make distraction more appealing and discipline feel like punishment. This is how your reward system gets sabotaged. It stops supporting your long-term growth and starts working against you. When you continually indulge in instant rewards, your tolerance increases. You need more stimulation to feel good, and delayed gratification becomes harder and harder to tolerate. That's why sitting down to write, to read, to study, or to build something of value suddenly feels exhausting or boring. Your brain has been trained to expect pleasure now, not later. This sabotages your ability to focus on tasks that don't provide immediate feedback, like exercising, building a business, or learning a new skill. These high-value activities pay off exponentially, but only if you can delay the gratification. And unfortunately, if your reward system is broken, your brain will actively resist those tasks, labeling them as pointless or too hard, not because they are, but because they don't deliver a quick dopamine spike. The solution is not to eliminate pleasure, but to retrain your brain to associate reward with real progress, not cheap stimulation. That begins by becoming intentional about what you reward. Celebrate the effort, not just the result. Start small. Complete one task you've been avoiding. Then give yourself a moment of recognition. Use breaks and treats as tools of reinforcement, not escape. Gradually reduce your dependency on passive rewards like scrolling or binge watching, and replace them with the satisfaction of achieving something meaningful. Over time, your brain begins to adapt. It starts craving the deep, lasting sense of fulfillment that only comes from earned success. This is where transformation happens, when you take control of your reward system and align it with your highest goals. Because when your brain starts to light up in response to discipline and growth instead of distraction and ease, you become unstoppable. Fear of failure programming is not just an emotional hurdle. It is a deeply embedded mental script written over years of conditioning, experiences, and interpretation of setbacks. From a young age, many people are taught, directly or indirectly, that failure is something to avoid at all costs. A bad grade, a mistake on the field, or a rejection in public becomes associated with embarrassment, shame, or judgment. The early programming is often reinforced by schools, families, and workplaces that emphasize perfection over growth. As a result, the mind begins to equate failure not with learning or improvement, but with inadequacy. You start fearing what it might say about your intelligence, your value, or your capability. Over time, this fear becomes so strong that it paralyzes action altogether. Instead of risking failure, you stay on the sidelines. Instead of reaching, you retreat. You convince yourself that not trying is safer than trying and falling short. But this fear-based programming is a lie. It's a mental illusion created by the belief that failure defines you. In reality, failure is neutral. It's simply feedback. It's information. It's a stepping stone, not a sentence. Every successful person you admire has failed more times than the average person has even tried. The difference is they didn't personalize the failure. They didn't let it shape their identity. They saw it as part of the process, not the end of it. When you begin to shift your perspective and understand that each failure sharpens your strategy, strengthens your resilience, and prepares you for success, the fear starts to lose its grip. You realize that the pain of regret is far greater than the temporary sting of falling short. You stop running from failure and start learning from it. And that shift changes everything. The real danger lies not in failing, but in never knowing what could have been. Fear of failure convinces you to shrink your vision, to lower your standards, to play small so you never risk exposure. You tell yourself you're being practical, but you're really just protecting your ego. And the tragedy is that while you're trying to avoid judgment, you silently judge yourself every day for not going after what you truly want. That quiet internal disappointment is what erodes confidence over time. The cure? Courageous action. You have to build the habit of stepping into risk deliberately, not recklessly, but intentionally. Start choosing paths that challenge you, set goals that stretch you, attempt things you might not succeed at right away, because every time you face that fear and act anyway, you reclaim power over the programming that once controlled you. Things that you're capable of accomplishing. Rewiring this fear isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily discipline. You must constantly remind yourself the purpose of life is not to avoid failure, but to grow through it. View your fears as indicators, not barriers. If something scares you because it might not work, that's often a sign you must do it. Why? Because that fear is standing guard over your next level. Break through it and your confidence soars. Not because you succeeded, but because you proved to yourself that failure doesn't control you anymore. That is when your mind transforms. You no longer tiptoe around life trying not to lose. You start charging forward with the belief that even when you fall forward. And that mindset alone will take you further than talent, luck, or circumstance ever could. Self-identity limitation is the invisible ceiling that keeps most people operating far below their true potential. It's not their talent, intelligence, or opportunity that holds them back. It's who they believe they are. From early life experiences, repeated messages, and societal influences, we unconsciously form a self-image, a mental blueprint of what we're capable of, what we deserve, and what's possible for someone like us. This identity becomes a powerful internal compass. If you see yourself as average, you'll subconsciously avoid actions that might make you exceptional. If you view yourself as someone who always struggles, you'll sabotage opportunities for ease or success. You won't even realize you're doing it. The mind naturally seeks consistency between your actions and your identity. So if you try to stretch beyond that internal image by aiming higher, doing harder things, or stepping into unfamiliar territory, your subconscious will try to pull you back in line, not because it hates progress, but because it craves stability. It wants you to remain who you've always been, not who you're capable of becoming. But here's the truth. Identity is not fixed. It is formed. And just like any habit, it can be rewritten. The first step is awareness. You must start noticing the language you use with yourself. Do you say things like, "I've never been good at this," or "I'm just not that type of person"? Those statements aren't facts, they're mental programming, and they're optional. The second step is intentional action. Act in alignment with the person you want to become, not the person you've always been. Want to be disciplined? Start acting like someone who is, even in small ways. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of identity you're building. The more you show up as that future version of yourself, the more your mind starts to accept it and stops resisting and starts reinforcing. You're no longer trapped by old narratives. You're authoring a new one. And when your identity expands, your capacity explodes, because you're no longer fighting to prove who you were. You're focused on creating who you can be. That's when progress becomes natural, effortless, and lasting.